failure of the left had a major role in bringing these people to power. I am someone who is really sad about the weakening of the Congress, really, because the Congress was the only possible national alternative to the right wing. A good majority of Marxists have mistaken Marxism for rationalism, but they should understand religion.
മലയാളികൾക്ക് പ്രത്യേകിച്ചും വെസ്റ്റേൺ പോയട്രി, ലാറ്റിൻ അമേരിക്കൻ പോയട്രി ഒക്കെ പരിചയപ്പെടുത്തിയ ഒരു കവിയാണെന്ന്. മലയാളത്തിലെ പോയട്രിയുടെ ഒരു ഫ്യൂച്ചർ എന്താണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എന്താണ് അങ്ങ് കാണുന്നത്? മലയാള കവിതയുടെ ഒരു പോക്ക് എങ്ങോട്ടേക്കാണ്?
മലയാളത്തിലെ ഇപ്പൊ കവിതയാണ് ഒരു പക്ഷേ മലയാളത്തിലെ ഏറ്റവും ജനാധിപത്യപരമായ ഒരു സാഹിത്യ രൂപം എന്ന് പറയാം. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ഈ സൈബർ സ്പേസിൻ്റെ വരവോടുകൂടി കവികൾക്ക് സ്വയം പ്രസാധകരാവാം, അവർക്ക് ബ്ലോഗുകൾ തുടങ്ങാം, പല ആളുകളും സ്വയം തന്നെ പുസ്തകങ്ങൾ തന്നെ പ്രസിദ്ധീകരിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. ആ തരത്തിൽ വളരെ ഇറ്റ് ഹസ് ബിക്കം ദ മോസ്റ്റ് ഡെമോക്രാറ്റിക് ഓഫ് അവർ ലിറ്റററി ഫോംസ്. But when you come to the quality, I mean, that because this is very subjective, you may find it to be very uneven. There are of course poets who are coming up, and there are at least a few poets who are very serious about their vocation. But as it happens very often in cyberspace, here also you find a lot of people taking poetry very lightly. Of course, they use it for some kind of a self-expression, which may be necessary for them to live on. But taking poetry seriously and hoping that his or her poetry will, cross generations and survive in the future. That kind of serious engagement with poetry, that has become rather rare. Perhaps it was always rare, but now that the number has increased so much, you feel it has become rarer, because you don't find poets who think that poetry is their very lifeblood, and they can live and breathe only in poetry, and their poetry should survive, and the coming generations should also listen to their voice. So that kind of deep understanding of poetry and engagement with poetry, that degree of it, the degree of that engagement has perhaps come down. But poetry will live on. There will be poets. All generations will throw up their own, poets.
Social media, poetry has become something kind of a side business for most poets.
Side business, or you call it a hobby kind of thing. So because poetry is often taken to be a kind of hobby, which it was not for, and it is not for many of us. It is something very serious. You are seriously engaging with language, with idiom, of course with experience, with imagination. So that kind of that's what I said, because it's a kind of, you are always a poet. I mean, even when you are doing other things, you are primarily, fundamentally, and always a poet, if you are a poet. But that does not seem to happen. This seems to be, a once in a while thing when you feel like writing something. So it becomes a hobby. It becomes often an instrument for socializing rather than an instrument of deep expression of oneself and one's, relationship with oneself and other people and nature and the universe, which ultimately poetry is. That understanding of poetry, that I find only in very few people, to be frank and to be honest. അവർ തുടർച്ചയായിട്ട് കവിത എഴുതുന്നില്ല. രണ്ടാമത് എഴുതുന്നതിൽ തന്നെ പലപ്പോഴും വളരെ അണീവണാണ്. ഒരു തവണ ഒരു നല്ല കവിത എന്നിട്ട് പിന്നെ ഒരു 10 ഗുണമില്ലാത്ത കവിത എഴുതും. ആ ഒരു ലാക്ക് ഓഫ് കൺസിസ്റ്റൻസി ഈസ് വാട്ട് റിയലി വറീസ് മീ ആസ് സംബഡി ഹു ലവ്സ് പോയട്രി.
സാഹിത്യ അക്കാദമിയുടെ പുസ്തകങ്ങൾ വരുന്നു. സാഹിത്യ അക്കാദമിയുടെ പുസ്തകങ്ങളിൽ സർക്കാരിന്റെ ലോഗോ ഉണ്ടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ ഒരു ഭാഗത്ത് ആരോപണം വരുന്നു. അതിനെ സെക്രട്ടറിയും ചെയർമാനും രണ്ടു തരത്തിലുള്ള അഭിപ്രായം പറയുന്നു. ശരിക്കും സാഹിത്യ അക്കാദമി അറിഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെയാണ് ഇതിന്റെ ലോഗോ വരുന്നത്?
സാഹിത്യ അക്കാദമി അറിഞ്ഞു എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ സാഹിത്യ അക്കാദമിയിൽ ഇത് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരാൾ ചെയ്തതാണത്, പബ്ലിഷിംഗ് വിങ്ങിലത്തെ ഒരാൾ. Which as far as I know, even the secretary didn't know that. So I am not necessarily to be consulted as the president, because it's just a kind of formal official position. Administrative things are with the secretary. So when I saw this first on the social media, and then I looked at the books and found, well, this was quite offensive in the sense, I believe Sahitya Academy should be as autonomous as possible. Not that it can be entirely autonomous, because it is, it runs on a government grant, and so it's not easy for it to be completely autonomous. But I have experienced that kind of autonomy in the Central Academy, where I was the executive head, because the government never came in. They never asked us to do anything. Neither to do a program nor to have their logo or any kind of publicity on our books or anything like that. So obviously I felt a little bad about it. And then I spoke to the secretary and I said, this is not done. And so finally we couldn't withdraw the books because, a few copies were printed, not many fortunately. And so the only thing we could do was to cover this logo with something else. So we had a picture of the Sahitya Academy pasted on that, and that the position now. And I'm not worried about this particular incident, but the general state of cultural institutions in the state, which I believe should enjoy, quite a lot of autonomy to do the things they want to do the meaningful things they want to do. So this kind of intervention doesn't do any good, either to the government or to the institution. And after that, two ministers called me, Rajiv, who happens to be my student, and also the culture minister. And he said the government had never given such an instruction. and that was a second shock. That is just done, without even the government's telling the academy to do it. So then I tried to find out, and I found out it was an officer who was in charge of publications who did this, who is not now there. He just retired. Before that, maybe he wanted to please the government or whatever, or maybe he belonged to the party. Anyway, that was a distasteful incident to cut it short.
Was there some kind of miscommunication between the secretary and the chairman, or some kind of communication gap?
No, I wouldn't call it that, because it is not necessary that, because the secretary is the administrative head of the academy, and it is not very necessary that the secretary asks for the president's permission for all kinds of small things the academy does. But I only felt he could have asked me if he came to know this, and if he also shared my feelings, which perhaps he did. He could have consulted me, because this could have been done in a much lower tone, in the sense, you could add a sentence in the preface saying that this is part of a special scheme, sanctioned by the government, or celebrating the second year of the government, or whatever. No, I have heard this slogan, but I wouldn't again equate them. It is like equating the central government with the state government. So because the state government's powers are ultimately limited, this is a very small state where nobody can be as powerful as the prime minister. I wouldn't make that kind of a comparison. That does not mean that we need not criticize any kind of dictatorial or authoritarian tendency that we may find.
Tactics the kind of tactics being played by the right wing and the center, those are being replicated. Those are being done here also.
Especially in the case of police. മാഷയുടെ എഴുത്തിലൊക്കെ ഈ അധികാര പ്രയോഗത്തെ കുറിച്ച്, അധികാരത്തിന്റെ റിപ്രസീവ് സ്റ്റേറ്റ് അപ്പാരസിന്റെ ഏറ്റവും വലിയ ഉദാഹരണമാണല്ലോ പോലീസിംഗ്. പോലീസിംഗിന്റെ കാര്യത്തിൽ ഇവിടെയുള്ള ഗവൺമെന്റ് ഇപ്പം UAP നടപ്പിലാക്കുന്ന കാര്യത്തിൽ.
Yes, I have opposed, and I still oppose these. There are false cases hoisted, and the police behavior generally. I cannot pinpoint. I cannot say exactly what the reason is, because one of the reasons that the leftists often put forward is that a lot of RSS people have entered the police. So that could be an excuse, and that could well be a reason also because it can easily make the government unpopular. Not that I have bought it completely, but it is not impossible. Looking at the strategies of the Sangh, it is not impossible that a lot of them have got into the police force also, and they create problems here and there, so that the government, and especially as the chief minister is in charge of the home ministry also, he also gets a kind of bad name. So I am not saying that it is so, but that is one possibility. Otherwise, well, there are failures. There are failures, and I am because I have always believed and still believe that these rules like the UAPA must go. I mean, they have no place in a democratic society at all. The Sedition Act, so there are many things that even Gandhi had opposed the Sedition Act at that time, and we need to oppose these acts. And as long as they are there, you cannot fearlessly voice your opinion, because you can any time be called a traitor, you can any time be arrested, and so many things up to what was done to Grovasu. So I have been following it very closely, and I also feel that this is not something a communist government should do or should have been doing. So there are certainly mistakes. There are negatives. There are points where we need to be critical. But what I mean is only that we need not dismiss the party altogether, saying that it is irrelevant. It is not, because it still upholds. Because I look not at the ministers, I look at the common people. And when I look at the common people who still have a lot of faith in the party, and sometimes it is a blind kind of faith, but still a faith in the party, believing that these are the people who stand for us and stand for justice. As long as those people are there, the party cannot go wrong beyond a point. There is a corrective force somewhere beneath. So there are mistakes certainly, but it is still a force. In Kerala at least, it is still a force. Even though at the national level it may be a minor force, but in Kerala it is still a major kind of force, and people have faith in that. So they may keep them or reject them or again bring them, and that's what Kerala's people have been doing, and doing wisely, I would say, so that no party would become very arrogant. Even 2 terms can make a party very arrogant. So and 3 terms can destroy it, as we saw it in Bengal.
It's sort of an idol worship of a leader, like as he said, in center and the state.
No, that happened. You cannot blame the leader alone for that. You need also look at there is a kind of psychology of hero worship, which is at work in almost all the in all the parties, in all kinds of organizations. There is a kind of hero worship. I am not saying because I don't think that the leader is saying come and worship me, but people go and fall prostrate at his feet, and you cannot blame the leader for that.
That can be systematic also. The leader creates a way in which only he will be the person who calls the shots. Then there is no other option for another person to.
Well, but it's that kind of a scenario was there, never there. Itara scenario, it was never there in Kerala, at least. Some kind of
true. I agree there. I agree because personality cult can be, that's all I can say generally, can be very harmful to especially a communist movement, as we saw in Stalin's time, because that is the best example of what you call a personality cult. And as long as the Marxist Party does not critique Stalin and Stalinism, there is this danger of the personality cult coming up in various forms and from various and even unexpected corners. So that is something one need to be worried about.
Do you think this Stalinism still exists in the CPM? Do you think this Stalinism still exists in the CPM and its leaders?
Stalinist streak. Yeah, it is. But as long as you find, Marx, Engels, Stalin, Lenin, Stalin on all the billboards and all that. So it seems his head is there among among the other heads. So I wouldn't reject that completely, that there is no streak of Stalinism. Because even now, when I or somebody else speaks against Stalin, there are a lot of people who keep defending Stalin. Because of him, the World War was won and the fascism was defeated and all that. Even though there were various chances that came together to defeat Hitler or lead him to suicide. It was not that Stalin alone fought. There are people who still defend Stalin. Stalin might have had his positive point. At that particular point of time, he might have taken a correct stand, even though later you have seen them shaking hands also, the same Stalin and Hitler. I mean, there was a point when they... but then yes, Stalinism can be a danger to any democratic party, not only Marxist party, because it's an anti-democratic kind of authoritarian trend or tendency, which can harm any kind of party.
When the issue of faith comes or spirituality comes, ഇപ്പോൾ ഈ അടുത്ത് മിത്ത് വിവാദം വന്നല്ലോ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ശബരിമല വിവാദം വരുമ്പോൾ ഇടതുപക്ഷത്തിന് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മാർക്സിസ്റ്റുകൾക്ക് അതിനുമായിട്ട് എൻഗേജ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ there seems to be faltering. What is there's a mismatch between...
You are very, very right. Because somehow I think a good majority of Marxists have mistaken Marxism for rationalism, which it is not. In fact, Lenin spent a lot of his time and his voice speaking against that kind of very empiricist, very external kind of rationalism. Lenin or any other major communist leader has not spoken against religion. If he has said, if Marx said it is the opium of the people, in the next sentence he also said it is a kind of solace, So, but that part is very often ignored. So I think, for example, Gandhi would be the best example of a person who understood what you call the Indian ethos or the Indian mind, and mainly because Marxists somehow failed to take into account several of the institutions that ultimately constitute the Indian populace. They also fail to take in the ethos that you are speaking about. That is one. They did not recognize. They were seeing it, but they were not seeing it also. Religions. They spoke about class, but they seldom spoke about caste, about which Ambedkar spoke so meaningfully and movingly. The problem is of marrying that kind of what looks like an individual spirituality with social service. And this is precisely where somebody like Sri Narayana Guru or Gandhi, they come in and they become extremely important, because they were spiritual. But for them, spirituality was not running away to a cave in the Himalayas and doing penance and to get one's own salvation. But so Gandhi often repeatedly said his penance was among the people. So and Narayana Guru also tried to bring interpret Advaita in a completely different way from the way in which Shankara interpreted that. It means there is no difference between you and me. That I, thou, separate, the divide vanished in his thinking. So as long as you are me, it is in my own interest that I also look after you and I serve you. So this is essence. I mean, it's of course a simplification, but this is the essence of the way in which Guru understood Advaita. So I think we need to learn a lot from people like Gandhi or Narayana Guru, and maybe there are other people who tried to combine an understanding of the inward and essential spirituality of the human being with the slogan of social service, or even identifying it with that, even seeking their own salvation among the people by working among the people. And so without that kind of an understanding, I believe it is impossible for anyone, any political party or any organization to work in a country like India. I am not saying that they should become religious. That's a different kind of thing altogether. Not that they should join a religion or they should form religious organizations, but they should understand the religion. This is a very different kind of proposition. Like T.S. Eliot says, to read religious poetry, you need not be religious, but you need to understand the state of a person who believes in religion. So that is all I am asking my Marxist friends and other friends who don't believe in religion, that you need to understand why they believe in a religion and what is the approach they have towards towards life and life of other beings and life of stars and the life of the universe itself. So I think that that dimension is missing. That is basically missing in Marxist thinking itself. And secondly, especially in a context like India, you really need to understand the important role that religion is playing, negative or positive, whatever, that role religion has been playing in people's lives. So without recognizing religion, without realizing the existence of caste, you can never completely comprehend Indian society.
Left as a political party, in the practical sense, left need not stick on with.
No. I don't think they really do. Because if you look at the actual practicing Marxists, you find many of them are believers. They go to Shabarimala, they go to different kinds of temples, and in their families they have people who believe in different religions and follow all the rituals of the religion and all that. So why should you have you say in public? Why should you renounce religion in public and practice it in private?
കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ ഒരു പൊതു ഈ ഇടതുബോധം നിൽക്കുന്നില്ല. കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ ഒരു വലതുപക്ഷവൽക്കരണം എത്രത്തോളം രൂക്ഷമാണ് മാഷിൻ്റെ ഒരു?
അത് ശരിയാണ്. അത് it is happening somewhere under our feet. Probably it is not marching along I recently wrote somewhere, it's not marching along the highways, but it is gradually creeping in through the bylanes. So because it is trying to reread even our myths and our rituals, and including the Onam myth, which has become a Vamana Puja kind of thing, which is one way of giving it a very, very negative and Brahminical kind of interpretation. Or they create divisions among the various kinds of communities, and in Kerala it means also various kinds of caste organizations trying to have a sway over SNDP or NSS or such organizations and all that, who refuse to take a position apparently, because even recently the NSS leader said we are not taking a position. And not taking a position can be an extremely dangerous kind of position, because it can mean at any time whoever is in power, we can support them or we can move towards them. And so that is how they are coming up in Kerala. We are rather encroaching. Coming in through through the margins, through these caste organizations, and also by promoting communal rivalry in various ways, sometimes very, very subtle ways. For example, between the Muslims and the Christians, creating a divide between the minorities is one of the best tactics that the majoritarian politics can have. So that also you find, they are playing on those lines too, creating a division between the Christians and the Muslims. Because it seems perhaps they already have some kind of a suspicion inherited from the Crusades times, and they seem to be playing on that kind of some subtle and perhaps unconscious historical sense or instinct, and creating a division between them. So that is how they are coming up, creating communal rivalry on the one hand in the minorities, and pleasing some of the communities and community organizations and reinterpreting or rereading myths and fables and all those legends associated with Kerala in various ways, which were so far understood positively, now being often posited negatively.
So, do you think this continuance in power, both at the center and at the state, does it harm, the outlook of a government to be more tolerant? Like we have it in center, continuous 10 years. Here
I wouldn't, as I said at the very beginning, I wouldn't compare the central government with the state government. In our federal polity, the center certainly has greater powers, and it can even, isolate a state. It can oppress a state in different ways by not giving the due grants as it is doing now, but by often imposing their programs on the state governments and all that. So I wouldn't compare the central government with the state government. The central government is what you can generally call the state in the Marxian sense, but not the state government. So it is just a small part of a whole mechanism of governance in the whole country. But it is true that there is a growing intolerance in both at the state level and the central level. Only the intolerance at the central level happens to be dangerous, and it could be it could lead to proper fascism. I'm not saying that proper fascism is not already there, but then it's almost, it's at the doorstep. It is at the doorstep. Yes, not absolute fascism, because still this democracy thing is, is a kind of problem. So I would still call it a rehearsal, a full dress rehearsal of fascism.
ഈ ലെഫ്റ്റിന്റെ റെസിസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഒരു ഫെയിലുവർ കൂടെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നല്ലോ. ഐ തിങ്ക് യു വാസ് ആസ്കിംഗ് അബൌട്ട് ദാറ്റ്. അതായത് ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഓൺസെറ്റ് വരുന്നു, സെൻട്രൽ പരിവാറിന്റെ ഓൺസെറ്റ് വരുന്നു എന്നുള്ളത് സംഭവം ലെഫ്റ്റ് ഇന്റലക്ച്വൽസ് ദേ ഫെയിൽ ടു സീ ദാറ്റ് ഓൺസെറ്റ് ഓഫ് സെൻട്രൽ പരിവാർ. അതാണ് ഈ കഴിഞ്ഞ കുറച്ചു നാളായി വളരെ ഗ്രാജുവലി തുടങ്ങിയ ഒരു മൂവ്മെന്റ് പെട്ടെന്ന്.
Yes, if you speak about the left in a broad sense, the failure of the left had a major role in bringing these people to power. I mean, if you look at it episodically, see, you can imagine a time when Jyoti Basu would perhaps have been the Prime Minister of India. And it was a possibility, not that it was an utopian dream, it was a possibility. And it was at that point of time, I have always spoken out against that. That was the time when, from the first, that united, government, the Marxist Party, for example, decided to come out on a reason which, at least to the people, looked flimsy. It's true. You can say, speak of ultimate communism, and so we are against war, so our nuclear policy and all that. But people didn't understand. I don't think even now they have understood why these people came out of that kind of a government when they were close to power, when they could have done very good things. Imagine a situation where the left or the Marxist Party had not come out of that government. I do not think the fall of the Congress would have been so soon, so fast. That would have been a completely different scenario. Maybe one time, maybe after 30 years or so, these people might have come to power. It would never have been so immediate. So that was a real Himalayan blunder that the party or a section of the party which wanted this committed. If they had not come out, it would have been a different scenario, because I am someone who is really sad about the weakening of the Congress, really, very genuinely, and I keep expressing that, I keep saying that on my Facebook and everywhere, because I believe, because the Congress was the only possible national alternative to the right wing, the only possible, and the left could have been and should have been a part of that, and maybe the left would have also gained, the Congress would have gained, and the country certainly would have gained out of that. But so coming out of pulling out of that government was a major blunder, and that was the beginning of the fall of the left fall of the Congress and the rise of the BJP. 3 tragedies that happened together.
വായനയും മറ്റുമൊക്കെ വളരെ സജീവമായി പഴയതുപോലെ തന്നെ പോകുന്നു.
എൻ്റെ കഴിയുന്നത്ര കുറേ വായിക്കുന്നു. ഇന്ന് കൃത്യമായിട്ട് അങ്ങനെ എനിക്ക് കമ്പയർ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ല. കാരണം ചില പീരീഡ്സ് ഉണ്ട് ധാരാളമായിട്ട് വായിക്കുന്ന, ചില പീരീഡ്സ് ഇങ്ങനത്തെ യാത്രകളും പലതരം എൻഗേജ്മെൻറ്റ് വരുമ്പോൾ അതിൻ്റെ സമയത്തിൻ്റെ ഒരു കുറവിൻ്റെ പ്രശ്നം കുറച്ചുണ്ട്. നൗ ദറ്റ് ഐ എം ഗെറ്റിംഗ് ഓൾഡ് കുറച്ചും കൂടി ഉറങ്ങേണ്ടി വരുന്നുണ്ട്. അത് ഡോക്ടറും പറഞ്ഞു. എനിക്കൊരു ന്യൂറോളജിക്കൽ പ്രശ്നമുണ്ട്, ഒരു ചെറിയൊരു അംനീഷ്യ പോലത്തെ ഒരു ചെറിയൊരു പീരീഡിന്. സോ അപ്പോൾ ഹി വാണ്ട്സ് മീ ടു സ്ലീപ്പ് ഫോർ അറ്റ്ലീസ്റ്റ് 7 hours അറ്റ് നൈറ്റ്, പറ്റുമെങ്കിൽ ഉച്ചയ്ക്ക് ഇത്തിരി നേരം എന്നൊക്കെ പറയും. അപ്പോൾ അതുകൊണ്ടൊക്കെയുള്ള കുറച്ച് സമയക്കുറവിൻ്റെ ഉണ്ട്. അതർവൈസ് ഐ കീപ് ട്രാക്ക് ഓഫ് തിങ്സ് ആൻഡ് ആസ് ഫാർ ആസ് പോസിബിൾ റീഡ് ഓൾസോ. ഇപ്പോൾ പക്ഷേ നമ്മൾ കുറേ പുസ്തകങ്ങളുടെ എണ്ണം വർദ്ധിക്കുകയാണ്. ഇപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ നോക്കിയപ്പോൾ ബുക്കർ പ്രൈസ് കിട്ടിയത് അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ വരുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് നോബൽ പ്രൈസ് കിട്ടുന്ന ആളുകൾ, ബുക്കർ പ്രൈസ് കിട്ടുന്ന ആളുകൾ, അവരെ പലരെയും മുമ്പ് വായിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടാവും. ചില ആളുകൾ പുതുതായിട്ട് അതിൽ കൂടിയൊക്കെ ഡിസ്കവർ ചെയ്യും. അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ വളരെ കൂടുതൽ സെലക്റ്റീവ് ആവുന്നുണ്ട് റീഡിങ്. അതിനൊരു കാരണം എൻ്റെ ഏജാണ്. ബിക്കോസ് ഐ ഹാവ് എ ഫീലിംഗ് ഐ ഡോണ്ട് ഹാവ് മച്ച് ടൈം. വെറുതെ കളയാൻ സമയമില്ല. അതുകൊണ്ട് വളരെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ടത് വായിച്ചാൽ മതി എന്നുള്ള ഒരു തോന്നലുണ്ട്. സോ ഐ ഹാവ് ബിക്കം മോർ ചൂസി ഇൻ റീഡിങ്. മുമ്പ് അതും ഇതൊക്കെ വായിക്കുമായിരുന്നു. ഇപ്പം